Well, I know you've been patiently waiting in the halls for quite an extended period of time today. Thank you for that. When you get into public life, you do it because you believe in serving the public. And that's something that we're all passionate about as we come to work every day. It's what motivates us to make a better Manitoba. And a better Manitoba means a better Manitoba for families. It means that we focus on their priorities. And that's what I'm committed to. My decision today is to continue to serve Manitobans. That's what I was elected to do. And I'm passionately committed to that. And the reason I'm passionately committed to that is because I think we're making great progress in this province. We're building infrastructure. We're making sure there's good opportunities for young people to live and work in this province. We're doing it in such a way that we protect health services so that folks get the care they need when they need it. And we all know that that's a continuing work in progress, as it is in every area that we work in. And we want to make sure people get good access to educational opportunities and choices that will give them the careers they need to put down roots and have a good life in Manitoba. And we do this all by listening carefully to what Manitobans say to us. And they have said to us, focus on our priorities. And they've said our priorities right now are steady growth and good jobs in the economy, with a priority on infrastructure at the municipal level, municipal infrastructure that protects us from floods, and you know how expensive that is and why we have to do that, and it's lots of work that has to go on there, and strategic infrastructure that builds the economy. And while you're doing that, they have said, make sure that there's opportunities for our young people. And as you know, I've been touring the province on the skills agenda. We've been talking to people about their ideas on that, letting them know what's out there, and we're continuing to make reforms in our educational institutions to ensure that we have the kinds of opportunities for young people where there are no wrong doors, that they can get a start in high school on a trade or a specialty career like cybersecurity, for example, at Sister High School, and then be able to take that into employment or to further education as they go forward. And as you know, we've also reached out to First Nations communities and asking what their concerns are and how they can have those opportunities as well, because we see a sense of inclusiveness in this province. So that's what I've been focused on. That's what I continue to be focused on. And you know, folks, that there's been some folks that have recommended I take a serious look at my future role, and some of them are cabinet ministers. I've had a conversation with those folks today, and I've said that we have to focus our energy on the priorities of Manitobans. That's where we need to be putting our efforts as cabinet ministers, as caucus members. And the conversation has to focus on those priorities. And I've had that conversation with them and emphasized the need to do that as we go forward and continue to work together as a team in this province. And so all options are on the table as we go forward. All options in terms of people's commitment to wanting to work on that vision for Manitoba. But today I tell you that I'm committed to that vision and planning to move forward.
And
thanks.
Swan said this morning that if you stay, the next election becomes a referendum on Greg Selinger. How do you respond to that, and does he stay in the cabinet? And
again, all options are on the table, and we've had that conversation. The referendum certainly is always on the government and the leader in the government and what policies they put forward and why they've done that. And as you know, we had a challenging choice to make. We were confronted by the flood of the century in 2011, and then again this year we've seen even more challenges with respect to floods, and we had to make some choices to invest in those kinds of infrastructure.
The implication is that the anger is on you and that you can't get
Sure.
past that in time for the election.
Yeah, and you know, I've been out talking to Manitobans ever since we've made that decision all across the province, and I certainly have sensed that anger from some people, but I've also sensed a growing awareness that we are committed to their best interests and their priorities. They have told us that their priority number one is infrastructure, and we've put a program in place to respond to that, a $5.5 billion program over 5 years. And the first year we've been accountable for the results, because they said, make sure it goes to your priorities and make sure you show us the results. And so we did that Conference Board of Canada report to show the results, over 8,000 jobs, 8,100 jobs, and over a $1.1 billion lift in the economy, and so we're being accountable for that.
Ever seriously consider stepping down?
You know, you have to reflect on these things all the time. I think there always are moments of reflection when you go along about what your options are and whether you want to continue to be in a leadership role. And I've certainly done that on more than one occasion. It's almost an annual review. And in some cases, it's a daily review, and I go home and talk to my wife, and she tells me how she thinks I've done that day out there, and she'll tell me whether I've messed it up or I've done a decent job on it. So, that's just part of the process, and you folks are certainly going to report on those things, and we believe it's important to be accountable to them.
You feel by the 5 senior cabinet ministers.
Yeah. No, look, I think they've expressed their concerns, and they've put that on the record. I don't think it has been particularly helpful in the last couple of days, and I've read some of the commentaries that it's, we're a quarter past midnight as opposed to a quarter to midnight. And but the reality is that I don't think it's been helpful for the mission that we're trying to serve, which is to make a better Manitoba, as I articulated. A better Manitoba with steady growth and good jobs, with good opportunities for young people, and addressing the priorities of infrastructure that people want. So, well, what I do with it is I make it very clear that all options are on the table in terms of how I proceed. Am I making a precipitous decision today or a rash decision today? Certainly not.
How do you work with someone who says...
Every year we review the performance of Cabinet and of people that we work with, including caucus. That's just part of the process, a standard part of the process. And in addition, as we move closer to an election, we talk to people about what their intentions are in terms of whether they're willing to run in the next election and what their commitments are. So that'll be part of the review, and that's why all options are on the table as we go forward.
Will you shuffle the cabinet because of what's happened this week, Mr. Selinger?
Again, as I said, anytime you make a change in your lineup on your team, it's based on an overall review of performance and whether people are doing their job in a way that advances the goals of the government in terms of responding to the priorities of Manitobans.
Do you regret raising the PST? Do you regret raising it?
I've said this before, that certainly I regret that it caught people blindsided and they felt a negative impact from that and they felt hurt by that, and I have taken responsibility for that and I will continue to do that. There were major challenges that we were confronted with as we ran in the run-up to that decision, and those challenges included recommendations for at least $1 billion of additional investment in flood infrastructure, with a growing demand and priority by Manitobans for other types of infrastructure improvements throughout Manitoba, with the need to continue to find ways to grow our economy at a time when the global economy had been more slowly recovering than anybody had anticipated. So yes, I do have regrets for the way it was rolled out, but I believe the decision was the right one for the future of Manitoba, because it allowed us to address the Manitobans' priorities, which is why we listened to them and have dedicated that money to their priorities and have said we'll be fully accountable for that and have been accountable for that. Dan?
You have left open the option then of asking for resignations, would be the first question. And secondly, how does a government function with so many faces on the front bench of your government in fairly open rebellion? Because it's one thing to say you want to go on, it's another thing entirely to go on in a spirit of disunity.
Sure.
So first of all, resignations, asking for resignations is one of the options on the table.
Dan, as I've said, all options are on the table, and that would include that fits under the all options category. Okay, just to be clear about that, that's an inclusive statement. And the question is, how do we work together? That's why I've had a conversation with the 5 ministers that have spoken out today, and I've emphasized that our first responsibility is to the people of Manitoba, and to serve their priorities and to listen to them. And everybody has to be seized of that in their job every day, particularly if they're given special responsibilities as a minister. But it applies to caucus as well. We all come here to serve Manitobans, and it's a great privilege to do that, and we should never forget that and get distracted from that. Any conversation related to other matters should be done in such a way that does not hamper our ability to serve the best interests of Manitobans with our full energies and commitments. Steve?
In 2016, do you still intend on running for re-election in 2016?
Yes, Steve.
But you only have half your team here, though. Like, where's the other half of your team?
Again,
how can you
people,
have a team?
Everybody has to make a commitment to working together, even if they have differences. And that's something that I've underlined for everybody today. And I've underlined that with people that have been showing up in the newspapers in the last couple of days. And I've said, that has to be your first commitment. And that expectation is very clear on my part. There's no doubt about it.